This show is a part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to your favorite. You'll get brand new episodes of all your favorite shows sent right to your device, and you'll help us know that you're out there listening. Never miss another episode by going to podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. Or click the follow or subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube.
To celebrate 250 years of freedom, Hillsdale College's Matthew Spaulding, along with professors from Hillsdale in D.C., sit down with Larry O'Connor of WMAL to discuss the truths that make this country great. This is Hillsdale on the Hill.
Dr. Luke Foster, of course, from Hillsdale College. Excuse me, I want to get the title right. Assistant Professor of Government at the Van Andel Graduate School of Government right here in your nation's capital. Dr. Foster, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I saw an op-ed that you wrote over at American Mind called "We Need Friends, Not Flatterers." And I'd love, within the context of America's 250th anniversary that we're honoring on a regular basis with our friends and partners at Hillsdale, I'd love for you to sort of expand on this idea, because it spins off of Secretary of State Marco Rubio's speech at Munich with regard to America's role in foreign policy, going all the way back to George Washington saying, beware of foreign entanglements, and how that idea has sort of affected how we interact with the world, but also many people, I think, sort of warp what Washington was trying to imply.
That's right. I certainly don't think Washington thought it was a bad thing to have friends abroad, and even he thought there were some countries that were more likely to be friends in the long term than others. Mm-hmm. But of course, he wanted friendship to be grounded in recognition of each other's sovereignty, right? and in each other's legitimate interests and the capacity to act in the world. That wonderful line in the Declaration to assume among the powers of the earth that separate and equal station. Right? Yeah. So grounded in the philosophy of the Declaration is the idea that you're taking part on a world stage, and there's supposed to be an acknowledgement among peers of an equal status. But of course, that takes work. That doesn't just happen. So, if you allow me, I was going to talk a little bit about the importance of the French alliance at the time of the founding.
That'd be great.
Which is, I think, part of the perspective that Washington's drawing on. I think the population numbers are really helpful here. So, in 1775. The 13 colonies are about 2.5 million people. Great Britain, we think, is about 8 million, so, more than 3 times the size of what becomes the U.S. But France has a population of 27 million. So France is really the heavyweight of Europe at the time, both in population and in its agriculture. So just getting a power that big on your side is obviously a big coup diplomatically. It's very important for recognition. It immediately makes the world take the American case for independence much more seriously. I think that we're familiar with, but there are 2 further things that were less obvious. So one is the military contribution of the French, starting with Lafayette, very famously, but then Rochambeau's army. Obviously, just having thousands of French regular troops with the Continental Army helps. But more importantly, the French helped give the early American military a standard of discipline, which is hard for us to imagine now, right? Because we have this stereotype from the Iraq War days of the French as, what was the line? Cheese-eating surrender monkeys, something like that?
Yeah, cheese-eating surrender monkeys, I believe. That's from the Gospel according to Bart Simpson, if I remember right.
Yes, that was widely said at the time. But in the 18th century, that's not how people looked at it, right? They thought, this is the best land army in the world. The British had the best navy, but the French had the best army. And so early West Point is very modeled on French military academies, all the way up through the Civil War. All the generals of the Civil War are trained on Napoleonic manuals, his tactics. So for the first century or so of U.S. military, the French are standard discipline, which is very, very important. And then the other big thing is they give us a Navy, because turning militiamen into Continental Army soldiers is already hard enough. But you can kind of get an army out of ordinary people who are angry and willing to grab their rifles.
Yeah.
But a Navy requires decades of technology, professionalism, infrastructure. And so the fact that the Chesapeake Bay, the French can field a Navy as powerful as the British one almost, and hold them off so that Washington can gain the victory at Yorktown, is really key. And so that helps kickstart arguments for the need for a strong federal government, for, the Department of the Navy is one of the very first federal departments in a very, very small government, because everyone recognizes, based on that experience, how important it is to have the professional basis to make a Navy.
So it sounds like
that, I think, is part of the genesis of our, having a serious military that can take its part in the world.
And certainly having Washington as our commander-in-chief of the Continental Army and all of those forces during the Revolution, and then having him be our first president sort of helped that handshake, I would think, between him obviously knowing what we needed militarily to protect the fledgling nation. It sounds like he was a proponent of peace through strength.
Definitely. And I think it helps also that his successor, the second president, was John Adams, and not Thomas Jefferson in a way, right? Adams is the guy who takes these lessons and says, let's invest in the Navy, and let's not ally with revolutionary France, crucially. Adams saw the shift that had happened. Because it's a certain tragedy, right? The French intellectuals, they see the American example, they're inspired, they think it's about liberty and equality, but they leave out the dependence on God part, and they leave out the objective duties that flow from natural rights, and they launch this terrible revolution. So it really creates a foreign policy crisis for the young American Republic. Are we going to follow these guys who are just our friends, or do we say, you actually don't go with your friends when they're doing evil?
Right.
Which is a hard choice to make.
Especially considering Washington's sort of unofficial adopted son, Lafayette, was part of what was going on in France there during that time. It was, I know, a tough thing for him. All right, hold that thought, because I want to then take those lessons learned about how we won our independence because of France and because of their military might, how that then informs what's going on today, how that is reflective in Secretary of State Marco Rubio's speech, and how France and Germany and England and our European partners could actually learn those lessons too with a little sovereignty of their own. Let's summarize first what ended up happening there, because France is secretly helping us and supplying us gunpowder there at the early parts of the war. And then we had a huge victory at Saratoga, and that sort of brought the French out of the closet, as it were, right?
That's right. Yeah. So there are early volunteer efforts. That's why you mentioned Lafayette, who's a great friend of Washington. There's this young French officer who comes with a kind of illegal, really, group of volunteers. But then after Saratoga, Louis XVI commits to a formal alliance and recognizes the independence of the United States, one of the first countries to recognize us. And then you get regular troops under General Rochambeau and the Navy.
And the next thing you know, they're surrendering at Yorktown because Rochambeau brought his fleet down.
Exactly. Yeah. So within 3 years, it makes a huge difference. And
by the way, if I could I ask you one other question, just because you just spurred something in me? Because we often talk about our alliances around the world right now and being suspicious of countries that want to partner us for one reason or another. This goes all the way back to this time. It's not like King Louis was like a huge fan of America, and like he wasn't in favor of revolutionaries overthrowing a monarch. Lord knows, look what happened to him a few years later. It was really all he cared about was sticking his eye in King George, right? I mean, he helped us out because he knew it would weaken Britain.
Yeah, which
is fine.
I think you can take it too cynically. Like, I think there was some affection for, hey, these are people who want freedom, great, but certainly there was also a lot of, this is part of, power politics. Like the France fought a big war with Britain in the 1740s, and then again the 7 Years' War just before, 1756 to 63. So it's a very recent history. And when the American proposal comes to King Louis, he says, this is a chance to really weaken the British Empire and reduce a key piece of their strategic asset, which is North America. So absolutely, it However, the irony is that it also makes the French debt crisis much worse and probably accelerates, if not causes, the revolutionary uprising 15 years later. So there's a certain tragedy there for King Louis.
Amazing. All right, so then, so I'm sorry for sending you off of the path there, though, but ultimately that's where that was our first major big foreign alliance, was with France, obviously. So now fast forward to where we are today, when Secretary of State Rubio, in the same position that Thomas Jefferson was in that first administration, speaks in Munich to our allies in Europe. How does it sort of connect the dots all the way back to America's first sort of global statement about our foreign entanglements?
Yeah, excellent. So, first big thing to note, of course, is that we're a lot more powerful than we were then, right? We're not the little guys on the edge of the world. We have both the economic and the military might to dictate things a lot of the time. And the question becomes: are you going to behave like any old empire that came before, or are you going to have a different attitude because you think that your freedom is grounded in justice and the gift of God, etc. And what I think is really important is that when we relate to our European friends today, we have to recognize that independence is not just something you have, but also something you do, right? It's not just a state, like other people recognize you as independent and therefore all the work is done. It actually requires constant practice. It's a skill. And so, again, we're having some trouble with decoupling from China, right? There are areas in which we're not fully independent. But basically, because of our economy and our military, we can act as we think we need to in the world, as long as we can agree internally. But with Europe, that's not so much the case, right? They depend on us in a lot of ways. And also, crucially, I think, they have allowed their spending, and especially their welfare spending, to get so out of control that their debt crisis has gotten very bad. This is particularly true in the French case. And military readiness has gotten eroded. Most European countries don't take their defense seriously anymore. Part of why I think France is interesting for us now is that France is an exception, relatively. France still has a real navy. France has a competent army. And what you see is that enables a nation to make choices, right? Do we want to go with our American friends, or do we want to do something different? So that's where I think Rubio's speech is so interesting. He's trying to say from the outside, which is, of course, difficult, we want you guys to be real countries. We want you guys to be capable of governing yourselves and to do the hard work that takes. And from the American side, we will do what we can to help, but ultimately it's up to you to get it right or get it wrong.
Yeah.
And that leads to interesting things like right now with the Iran war, right? The French are sending 8 frigates and an aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf, which most European countries couldn't do.
Right.
They didn't start the war with us, but they're now they've gotten involved because of the Iranian missiles. So the question is, do you want allies like that, or do you want people who are subservient, who just have to go with you, but then are actually, I think, in the long run, weaker?
Well, incredible historical perspective on where we are today, how we got here, and how, everything old is new again in some respects. Dr. Luke Foster, we got to leave it there. Appreciate you stepping up today for our ongoing conversation about Hillsdale College's Washington, D.C. campus and graduate school, by the way, of government in Washington, D.C., our conversation, America 250. And don't forget, the Van Andel Graduate School of Government is located right at Capitol Hill, and then they offer a part-time MA in government degrees for young professionals. Go check it out at LearyForHillsdale.com.
Thanks for listening to Hillsdale on the Hill, presented by Hillsdale College. To learn more about the Van Andel Graduate School of Government and Hillsdale's work in our nation's capital, visit dc.hillsdale.edu. That's dc.hillsdale.edu.